What we've done is we've mapped 5 core stages to the path to agility, and it starts with align. And at align, what we're talking about is, are we aligned around the why? Does everybody understand it? Is it creating a sense of urgency? Are we communicating it effectively? Is it motivating and compelling people into action, that they're excited about going after whatever this North Star of, like, we've got to start releasing our product faster and with higher quality, because if we're not going to be responsive to the market, and we're going to get beat by our competition, or we're being beat by our competition, right? Whatever that might be. So we've got to align at that level. And then we've got to go into this next stage we call learn, which isn't just about like going to the classroom and learning the terminology. More importantly, it's about creating a learning culture of, like, take at a team level. Are we having meaningful retrospectives and taking action and learning how to get better as a team? At a system level, are we figuring out how to optimize the system for flow and other things? At an organizational level, are we identifying impediments to agility and resolving those impediments quickly, right? Are we learning as an organization how to get better? And if we don't, right, what happens? So we're down in this dip. And if we're not learning and we're not getting better, and everything's starting to get really difficult, right? People are getting really stressed out, and we're not figuring it out. We're not learning together. Then where do you think everybody's going to want to go? They're going to want to clamor back to the beginning, right? And that's where, back to our stats that we started off with, that's why I believe we have 30% who are at superficial agility, or 50% that are just floundering down in this dip. Part of it's if we're not creating learning culture. Part of it's if we're not aligned around a compelling reason why. When it starts to get difficult, we're going to be like, this sucks, let's go back, right? But if we're compelled by this purpose, then we're going to work through it, right? And we're going to keep trying to persevere through, make the organizational changes that we need to make in order to make that happen, to get to the first kind of stage of success, if you will, is where we start getting more predictable. And predictability is about getting the variability out of the system, right? So we talk a lot about scaling by descaling, reducing the complexity, simplifying the system allows us to get more predictable, right? And because next we want to start delivering faster. And the 4th stage is about accelerate. And if we're not very predictable, when we say go faster, like, we're just creating more noise in the system. So we got to get predictable, and then we can start optimizing, right? Because if we don't have good predictability, then our data doesn't really tell us anything. It's too noisy, right? So we got to get predictability first, and then we can start optimizing, because we'll figure out where are the places that are causing the friction, right? Where are the bottlenecks in the system? Where's the bottlenecks in the flow of the system? So predictability is about reducing the complexity, and reducing the variability comes from things like interruptions, changing priorities, quality issues, right? Things like that, production issues, things like that. And then we get to speed with accelerate. And then ultimately we're trying to get to a stage of what we call adapt. And adapt is where we're saying we can sense and respond with the market, right? We can test and learn quickly with the market. Our organization adapts or has resilience based on what's happening in the market, right? I mean, we adapt. All of our organizations had to do some form of adapt this year, right? And potentially even multiple times. And so the question is, how quickly were we able to respond to that? And is that part of our kind of DNA, if you will, of being able to adapt? And are we adapting organizationally? Are we adapting from a product perspective, right? But we can't adapt if we can't deliver, if we can't, if it takes us 6 months to get a feature into production, well, then we have a 6-month product learning cycle. Like, that's not going to allow us to adapt. So accelerate is dependent on things like DevOps. For IT, are we able to deliver something quickly that we can then test and learn with smaller experiments? But we can't do that if we can't get the variability out. We can't do that if we don't have a learning culture. We won't get through this if we're not aligned around a why. So those are the 5 stages that we look at with Path to Agility. And then we have 3 levels, and you've heard me kind of talking about these. Team level, easy to understand, where most of our energy is in agile, in the agile space has gone over the last 20 years. But then we also have the system level, and we're not talking about the technical system. We're talking about the system of teams, the flow of value through the system. It takes multiple teams to get value out the door, typically. And so we need to optimize at that level. And here's where a lot of our scaling practices come into play to help us optimize at the system level. But we also have things from an organizational perspective, right? Are we, from a leadership, are we making the org changes, structure changes that we need to? Are we filling the roles that we need to? Are we funding those? So finance practices, are we still doing project-based funding or product-based funding, investment streams? Are we switching our HR practices from top-down stack ranking to, continuous performance feedback, right? What are the mechanisms that are supporting organizationally the systems and the teams?